Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show, where designers discuss design. We're on episode 92, talking branding yourself and not with an iron or something like that, because that'd be painful, and I don't have good pain resistance. So I don't know, Tiffany, do you have decent pain resistance?
I mean, I do. I have several tattoos, but branding is something that I've never wanted to do.
Yeah. So
that kind of branding.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about, how do you get your name out there? How do you how do you put out a good vibe? How do you connect with your audience, with publishers, all that kind of stuff? How do you build some hype for your games? All that kind of fun stuff. We have a couple incredible guests that are knowledgeable on many things, and we're going to pick their brains on this, and I'm sure we'll go off topic and talk about other wonderful things. But before we go there, I just got to ask Tiffany, what games have you been playing recently? I know you've been streaming some stuff.
We have, but really behind the scenes of the streams, we've been playing Star Wars Destiny.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of love is going on for that.
Yeah, it's really solid. I think it's the first when we first started dating, Steve and I were both into Netrunner separately, and but we never got into Dice Masters because we didn't like the game, and
right.
But this one we both really like, and I think it's a lot more digestible than Netrunner. So yeah, it's really good.
That's good. I've never really got that into Dice Masters, but I wanted to, so maybe this will be my game. Maybe this will be my jam. Although I am afraid of being into something that is collectible. I don't know if I can afford that on not only a financial level but on an emotional level.
Yeah, it's definitely got the one more boosters thing. So yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, why don't, without any further ado, because we started late, let's just jump right into our topic and see where it goes, where the conversation goes. But I would like to introduce our guest. We have Amber Cook with Fantasy Flight, and she's important there. I don't know exactly how. She'll tell us, but it's like digital something. I don't know. There's words in her title that make it sound fancy. So, hi, Amber.
Hi, I'm actually not with Fantasy Flight. I'm with Asmodee Digital.
Oh,
which is actually different. It's a different thing. So I'm in Minnesota, and all our people are in Paris. So that's a different office than the Minnesota people.
You guys own everyone though. So it's like all. I should just say Asmodee. I should just say Asmodee, and I'll never be wrong. And then we also have Matt Fantastic. I think maybe coming to us. Yeah.
I'm showing him. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. I steered you wrong. You have to press the mute button at the top.
Yeah. There we go.
Here.
There we go. Hey.
And Matt is many things that I will let him describe all his different ventures, because he's involved in games in a million different ways. And so, Matt, what are you all involved
with? I also
with?
own nothing.
You own a cafe?
Yeah, so the two biggest things I do are I own Prettiest Princess Games and Elm City Games, which is Prettiest Princesses, where I publish all my stupid bullshit game nonsense and some of my weird stuff. Elm City Games is a gaming cafe in New Haven. And then I do design for other people and random consulting. I do manufacturing stuff. About to make a big announcement that I was hoping to be able to make this week, but I don't think I'm gonna. About some new manufacturing stuff, and then another cool new joint publishing venture. Is my audio fucked up?
It's coming in and out a little bit. It's coming in and out. I don't know why. Well, let's jump to Amber while you're looking at chords, and maybe somehow sound will magically fix itself. But I do want to jump to Amber, because I've had this conversation with you before and been part of kind of a larger conversation about branding and the importance of branding as a designer. And I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about why you think it's important that a designer focuses on branding themselves?
You know, I don't know that I think too much about how designers brand themselves. I think about how publishers brand themselves a lot.
Mhm.
And I think about it visually because I think I'm more of a visual person. So visual identity is really important to me. And I think that's just because I really like to recognize and value the publishers where I can tell it's their game before I see their logo on the game. I think that Days of Wonder always did a really good job with that, for example. Like their games just, I knew that they were theirs. And I don't know, I guess I just studied marketing for a long time, and it always seemed really important to be able to recognize by the quality of somebody's artwork and the quality of somebody's game. I felt like I knew what I was buying before I even opened the box. I could have trust in the quality of the product they were making, just knowing that it was coming from their company.
Yeah, Days of Wonder is a great example of that. Matt, well, so let's talk about, so Matt, your brand is like very well known, like your personal brand. So how important is it, or how has it helped that your brand is like out there?
So
If that makes
for
sense.
me, it's been both really. And can you guys hear me okay as I could?
It is, it just kind of goes like, it does a little in and out sometimes, but it's mostly good.
Okay, well, so my brand is a dumb extension of me, just being me. So I've been kind of like pretend in the industry for a real long time. And when I was just like volunteering and going to conventions and hanging out, like, you know, I was just a weirdo. And I would, you know, decided that I wanted to start wearing princess dresses to show, you know, just whatever, dressing up and being me. And volunteered and worked for people and kind of worked my way up in the industry and just kind of maintained. So it's been really interesting because I talk to people a lot about this, that and grew very organically with who I am. And so I get away with all kinds of stuff that like basically no one else can. It's just, you know, like that the expectation is like, oh yeah, I saw Matt completely wasted at 5 a.m. stumbling down the balance between a bunch of like strippers and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, totally. Like he was still at the booth and like good job, like, you know, so it would be scandalous for other people our expectations for me. So you know, it's definitely helpful that in an industry like games where I think there is a lot of hegemony, you know, a lot of there's kind of a few exist in terms of how you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to act and how business is done, and that I've just completely fucked that all up, and it doesn't always help.
Yeah, I was realizing I don't know if you're in the vlog this year for like the last convention, but every convention I go to, there's at least one Matt appearance, and usually at a bar. But I was like, I don't know if there's a Matt at this year's SN appearance. But anyway, I'll have to fix that next con. Amber, so we mentioned briefly like where you work, but let's talk like about what you do, because I actually don't know what you do, and it sounds like it might be very appropriate for this topic.
Well, I think what I've done is more appropriate for this topic right now.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm working with Asmodee Digital and helping to launch the new lineup of games. So they've got a pretty amazing lineup coming for 2017 of digital apps. We just released Colt Express, and we've got Mysterium and Potion Explosion both coming in January, and then we've got Spot It coming in March. So there's a whole big lineup, and I'm mostly working on marketing there. But in my past, especially with Looney Labs, I did a lot of branding work. Looney Labs is, I think, another example of a company that has a really strong identity in the industry, and people see tie-dye and they think Looney Labs, and if they're at Gen Con. And I was really lucky that I got to work with Kristen and Andy there, and they gave me a lot of freedom to just try doing a rebrand or just an update to their brand. So we did a lot of that visually and just talked about how we wanted to be known. They had called themselves that hippie game company for a long time. And I think that has like mixed connotations for people. And given that they were selling in Target and Barnes and Noble, we kind of just went back and looked at like, what do people hear when you say that tagline, and how are we representing ourselves that way? How does our logo look when we say that hippie? You know, does it look dated or does it look fresh? I think when you have a visual presentation that's very strong, you can say things that are a little bit more off the cuff and like they get accepted more easily. And like, I think Matt's a great example of this. I think Matt does a lot of crazy stuff at conventions and has a lot of fun. And he he asked if this was a family show before we came on, because, you know, Matt's going to curse and Matt's going to be Matt and he's going to do crazy stuff. But I think anybody who knows Matt and gets to know him pretty well knows that he shows up regularly for work and he does a really great job. He can outsell pretty much anybody I've ever seen on a convention floor. And so it's not like he's, you know, I think that really stands out. And I think that contradiction is part of his brand. And so, yeah, I mean, I think about that kind of stuff. I don't know what I do. I do a lot of marketing work. I do PR. I do all kinds of stuff, but I think about that kind of stuff a lot. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, that's great. That's exactly the kind of stuff we want to dig into here. So along those lines, Matt, what kind of advice would you give designers? I know, like, because you meet a lot of new designers at cons. You're very welcoming and inclusive. What kind of advice would you give to new designers as they're trying to break in and get to know people and network? And what kind of steps do they need to take to break in to the board game industry?
So this is that's interesting, because I talked about this at a thing before. And there's like two layers to this that I think are really important. One is what I would say in terms of your personal brand, which I'll because that's more of the topic, so I'll talk about that more. But there's also just I get a lot of advice to designers about, like, basically your stuff sucks. You need to make stuff that doesn't suck. And then like the thing is that the 1% of those people that are like, you know what, fuck you, man. Like, check this out. Does this suck, motherfucker? And then I'm like, well, actually it doesn't. Good job. Like, way to be. Like, glad you pushed back on that. Like, fuck me. That's right. Like, you need to have that fire. You need to sell what it is that you're doing. And, you know, over 1,000 games came out just at Essen this year, right? Like, no one cares, right? You have people like Amber who are, you know, managing incredibly expensive multimedia marketing campaigns to try to get people's attention. Like, shitty little, you know, it's Carcassonne, but like is not going to grab that market share, grab that attention, and about getting that attention and making something, you know, part of that is making something good. But a lot of what's going on in games right now leads into this personal brand thing. Which I think its publisher brand is like Amber said, is a bigger deal in general, but this is really important if you're self-publishing, right? You need to stand out, right? You're never going to do a bigger buy than Asmodee at Essen, like, you know, Pegasus or something, you know, like you're just not. And so if you're like an up and coming indie, like, you need to be doing something that gets people's attention. There's a whole bunch of different directions that can be. It can be visual presentation, it can be theming, it can be mechanic, it can be, you know, it can be just your strength of personality, like hustling a booth dressed up in some silly outfit. There are these guys that I remember from last year at Essen. They had it was like this plastic cheeseburger game, and it was just these like super high energy, ridiculous short order cooks running around with these plastic cheeseburgers. And about the game, I think it was okay, but it was just like, okay, cool. Like, so many people at the show saw that. So many people noticed that. You had your chance. You know, that's the biggest thing that you're really trying to do, is get your chance, because there's so much noise. I mean, that's part of it, is that there's a million cool things going on in addition to all the garbage. Like, I don't have enough time to play all the cool stuff that I want to. You know, like, I played Destiny once, and I'm not going to get into it because I just don't have time to.
Right.
There's so much cool stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I was actually going to throw it over to Amber. I'm curious then, out of that volume, how do things stand out? Like how are companies going to rise to that? How are designers going to kind of respond to this oversaturated market?
I think it's really important that the quality is always there, because without the quality being there, it's really difficult for, I think that's what people focus on if it's not working well. But if your game's working well and then you can add some sort of shtick to like what you do, and that helps unify what your product line is, as a designer or as a publisher, I think it's super helpful. So I think, I think Plaid Hat is a company that did that really well. I mean, I knew who they were, even though I never played any of their games, just because they had plaid hats and like they said that, and I knew they were doing good marketing because they had the podcast. I didn't listen to it, but I knew that it was a thing that was happening. And, I think a company like Blue Orange has a similar sort of brand recognition. When they do something, you expect it to be pretty good quality. They, it's going to be family friendly. If you're looking for a party or game to take to your family holiday party or something, and you get something from them, the little kids there are going to play it with you. So I think having some sort of consistent message that comes across, and you just have to figure out the best way to communicate that. For some deeper stuff, I think having podcasts and going out there and getting your name out makes sense, but you really have to think about how you're presenting yourself. And I think FFG does that really well. I knew who they were and I recognized their games through visual packaging, and also because they were like more strategic than most of the games that I was playing. I knew that Asmodee, before the buy-in, before they bought everybody, I knew that like the games that were being distributed from Asmodee into the North America were all pretty good European games. They were all pretty much games I was going to like. And I don't really know what that is. I think you just get a feeling for it. That you've played a couple of games that are this weight, and they always have this quality of graphics, and they always have this sort of quality of mechanics. And then I think you just need to get that out there. I think it's difficult to say because I think it takes a lot of time. I think we spent 4 or 5 months when I was at Looney Labs just reworking the logo and figuring out how to visually present that across all of our different games and in all of these different situations like conventions and social media, on video. And it's really difficult. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of people's attention. I think Matt knows it internally, which is why people I think Matt just kind of does it. And is a really good example of people who know that kind of thing, I don't know, innately. And I think asking other people what they think about the way you present yourself or the way you present your games is helpful, and especially if you're willing to listen. And I think that goes for the mechanics of your games, the quality of your games, and also your brand. There's one other person I think does a really good job of this, Eric Lang. I'll play anything that he brings to me because he's a great designer, but also I think he has a good brand in the industry of just being like a good human, being very approachable, being very friendly, wanting to make the industry better. And I think aside from the actual mechanics of his game, he brings that brand to the industry of just being a positive influence. And I think you can do that sort of thing and figure out what part of the industry you want to help, or what you really what you think you can add value to. And just make sure you do that in every product that you produce.
Consistency, super. Yeah. So Matt, to flip it back to you to talk about personal brands as a designer and what people can do as themselves. What advice or recommendations would you give somebody so your brand is built on you, and you are very extrovert and you're out there and like people can see you a mile off because you have a very distinct look. But what if somebody is not as outgoing or visually, what if somebody's a bit more nervous or something like that? What are some things that you recommend that they can do to help build that brand and presence for themselves?
I mean, I think there's two layers that you're working at. Is my audio better, by the way?
A little bit.
I think there's two layers that you're kind of working at. One is professional, and one is sort of more public facing. And I think professionally, the biggest thing, and this is something I mentioned in Amber, is that my reputation is character, but also, showing up to work. I might have stayed out all night and run a 5K on my way into the booth, at that booth, and I'm selling and I'm making moves, and I'm things are happening. So I think professionally, no matter what, Eric, another person who he gets given something or he does a design, he works it, he does it. Any publisher that signs on with him knows that they're getting work, but also the support, the continued support, like whatever it is, he's going to go out and tell people about the game. He's working with him, something's going to happen. So professionally, I think this is the advice that I give to literally everyone that is interested at all in the industry. Is you gotta hustle it up, go to some shows. Like, if you're not that serious, don't go. But if you want to make a career, go to shows. There is definitely someone you can volunteer for. Maybe get involved in some of the Facebook stuff. There's plenty of ways to kind of vaguely get to know people and just kind of figure out who people are in the industry. And then volunteer for companies in booths. Never ever learn more or get more connected. It's really like bouncing stuff around. There's like a whole bunch of.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. I moved. I'm sorry.
I just make sure it wasn't me. But yeah, volunteer for companies. Go work booths because that you're gonna get better at selling. You're gonna get better at being more of a personality. You're gonna get better at having to deal with the fact that you are going to be client facing. Like, if you don't want client facing, like, you're going to have a much harder time. If you don't want to build a personality, you're going to have a much harder time. There are a handful of individuals who are just brilliant, prolific geniuses, but by and large, still very personality driven. There are a lot of people who know about, especially when you're a hobby, people know about who design this. People follow designers. People pay attention to that. People know, hey, that guy was really cool at this convention, or hey, that guy was kind of a dick, or I've never even seen that guy. He's like some total mystery. And you need to be out there. You need to get comfortable with that. So volunteering at booths, you learn how to demo, you learn how to pitch, you learn how to sell, you learn how to close. You get to see so much of what other people are doing in that space. You get to learn from people that are working their own booths that have been doing this for forever and doing really well. And you get to make those connections, because if you go in there, you work hard, then that publisher is going to see you working hard, and other publishers that are friends with them are going to come by the booth and they're going to see you, and you're going to be like, you're in the industry, even if you're just like a random volunteer. If you are cool, just it comes to you. Like I meet volunteers all the time, and I'm like, this girl is super cool. This is awesome. Like, let me tell my other friend when they're looking for volunteers. Like let me do this. Let me do that. You need to be the kind of person that people want to help, and the best way to do that is by being helpful and just putting yourself out there and wanting other people to succeed. And when you help other people, people are like, hey, like, that was pretty cool. Like, what, like, when the opportunity presents itself, maybe I can help you. And it's not like a tip for like keeping track kind of thing, but when you put out that positive energy, people, and you're being helpful, and hey, do you need help moving those boxes? I know my shift's over, but whatever. That's just the most incredible way to sell yourself, because you're showing what you are.
Yeah. And it's huge, especially at a convention, having the physical presence and just being super helpful. But so, Amber, we have a question from the YouTube community, just the chat, and it's from Dustin Schwartz, and it's, any tips on branding when you're not a corporate entity? And Matt's talked on it a little bit, but I would like to twist that question and basically, do you have any tips for somebody on branding when they're not a corporate entity and maybe they can't go to conventions? So stuff that they can do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that I never meet, but whose stuff I follow on social media. And I think, especially if you're not a person who's very outgoing, it makes sense to start your base sort of in a medium where you're comfortable. So if that's just designing a bunch of games, do that first and then try and get them out there. And people will see the quality of what you're making. And I think if it's something that's more like commentary or reviews, I think you can still develop like a little logo, and you can still talk to people who understand what you're trying to do, and brainstorm with them ways to have a different content on social media. There's really great resources online because there's so many people selling social media tools. I mean, you can just go to Hootsuite or like Iconosquare or anything like that, you know, and they'll tell you how to do social media. I didn't go to school to do that. You just learn how to do it after seeing what people start liking and what they don't like. And I think you can do that pretty consistently and just try to put up a post a couple times a week and start interesting conversations, join the board game hour, reply to people who are asking questions on Twitter. And I think if you just keep doing that, you end up becoming part of the industry. Board Game Geek's a really good place to do that too, especially if you're not going to be a jerk. And I do think it's important to go to shows if you can, because I think when you meet somebody in person, it really changes. They become a much more real, I don't know, interacting with people over social media has its problems, and not everybody's super nice. But when you meet people in person, I rarely have problems at these shows with people being as rude as they are on the internet. And so I think it's really nice to see the human side of the industry and just play games with people that you don't even know and realize that they're actually pretty fun. And even if you have disagreements about the way you might present yourself online, they're generally pretty good people.
So I'm just going to jump in for a sec. Well, not, I don't even want to argue it. I think Tiffany said, that, you know, what about people that can't get to conventions? And my answer is, then you don't actually give a shit about being in the industry. And like, that's totally cool. I think it's super important for you to prioritize the things in your life. And if this is a fun hobby and you want to do that, that's great. But you shouldn't be paying attention for how to be a professional in the industry. You should be asking, how do I do fun hobby stuff? Do I hand production and this and that as a sideline? That's great. Totally do that. Not saying don't do that, but if you actually want a career in the industry, you want to be a professional, you know, like, get your shit together, spend a few $100s and go to a fucking convention and meet people and do work. Like, you know, how much do you spend on college? How much do you spend on per credit? Like, this is, if you actually want a career, you need to get your shit together and go do this. A job's not going to fall in your lap. You know, like,
absolutely.
All these people that have these jobs, these careers, they didn't get it just by fucking off on Facebook and asking questions, you know, on podcasts. You know, go do work.
Yeah, no, I actually absolutely agree, and I was given the advice from Eric Lang, who's already been mentioned, as you got to go to shows. You just you got to go to shows. You wanna connect with people, like Matt's saying. You just if you're serious about it, you gotta somehow get yourself there, and if that means, you know, working at a booth or whatever way you got to do it, just you got to be in the right place at the right time. So, 100% agree. I want to jump back to Amber with another question from YouTube. This one's from Chris Schreiber, and he's asking a question that I think is really relevant to you because I follow the 100 project, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well as part of this question. But what is the role of a strong website in game branding? And it feels like it's not as big a deal in the gaming industry. Do you think that's going to change over time?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have, this is similar to what Matt said. I mean, I think there's so many people coming into the industry right now because there's this big bubble or boom or whatever.
Ooh, we just lost Amber. She was mid-genius thought. Oh, and she's coming back, tagging back in.
Sorry.
Oh, you're in.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of people that are coming into the industry and they don't actually want to be professionals in the industry. They just want to be engaged consumers. And I think there's a lot of room for people who are hobbyists to do that. And I think that's fine. But if you actually do want to be professional with your reviews or whatever it is that you're doing, you have to have a website, just like you have to go to conventions, like Matt was saying. It's just an investment you have to make. I mean, I have a really basic website because I was doing consulting for the last year before I started with Asmodee. And that was just a fun project for me because I realized I wasn't playing very many games. But I also know that I'm a person in the industry who does marketing professionally, so I couldn't put up like a terrible website. That would be bad. And so I had somebody make a really simple logo for me. And because she had done a couple projects with me, she did a really nice job. And then I just used it as an excuse to be able to play games and talk about them online because I was only talking about the games that I was working on, and that gets limiting after a while. You want to you realize that everybody else is making amazing things too, and you want to play and talk about it. So I just used the website as sort of a home base. And right now I don't think I've put a blog post up since like July maybe. But I post on Instagram all the time. So I just you can go into Squarespace, and for $10 a year, I think you can have, or $10 a month, I don't know what it is, but you can put you can even have your Instagram feed just be your homepage of your website, which is what I did, just so it would have active content on there. So even if I wasn't blogging, I at least had something going up there that shows that I'm currently active in the gaming community. And it's really easy to do that. I don't know how to code really very well. And yeah, I did that by myself. So if I can do it through help guidelines, I'm sure you can too. And I do think it's super important. I don't understand people who don't have websites if they're really trying to make a career of something.
For sure. Jumping back to Matt here, I'm curious if you talk a little bit about the relationships as you're forming them with different publishers. How do you continue kind of networking or connecting with publishers? What are some tips that you would give people when it comes to just keeping the communication lines open and touching base? Any tips or suggestions for people?
I mean, I think a lot of this is, I'm going to give you tips and stuff, but ultimately this is hopefully just helping you for people the way that they think about it themselves. A lot of this comes from how much do you want it. I mean, we both, me and Em are building on this is if you dedicate just want to be an engaged part of that community, you just are. So like I don't like wake up in the morning and say, ooh, let me like check Daryl's Facebook page, and then let me see what Amber's up to, and let me I better send a funny comment on Eric Lang's photo. It's just, these are things that just naturally happen. Some of it I guess I cheat a little bit because at this point a lot of these people are my friends and stuff, but even just in some of these more public forums like BGG, some of the Facebook groups, and I'm there whether or not I'm doing professionally or not. Like I'm in there and because I'm interested. I want to see what people are talking about. I want to get involved in these conversations. I get involved in a bunch of stuff that I probably it is game related, but it's probably a huge waste of time in my life. Arguing with people about this and that, and talking about things. A lot of it just comes from this. You kind of live and breathe what your career is if you're in games. I think. Like it's my everyday. It's what I do. I wake up, I talk about games with my friends. I spend the afternoon talking about games. This weekend, could tell everyone very clearly that I spent a lot of time with Ross and a bunch of time with Nate. Ross from US Happily and Nate from IW. Not to name drop whatever, but like we literally spent hours and hours just talking about industry stuff and talking about games and talking about what we thought was cool. And that was what we did when we were just friends hanging out and drinking beers. Was we weren't talking about whatever else. We were like, well, games, like that's what's cool. This is what we're interested in. This is what excites us. This is in my free time what I want to be doing. So a lot of it is really just thinking about what it is that you want out of life. Like I really like what Amber said as a phrase is was highly engaged consumers. But it's like a lot of people that think they want to be in the industry just really want to be like kind of cool insider, like VIP club consumers. You don't actually want to you don't live and breathe games. You have other stuff that you're interested in. My entire life pretty much revolves around games, and for good or bad, it just kind of happens.
Can I jump in there, guys? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, since I've switched over to digital, that happened in October, and I'm still in all these board game groups. And my boss said to me one day when he was visiting, he was like, you're in tech now. You don't work in board games anymore. And I was, And so it's a funny thing, like, because I really don't have to be pushing anything in a board game community anymore. I have to think about more casual gamers and just different audiences. I mean, obviously there's overlap because it's board game themed apps, board game conversions, but I don't need to be in like the groups where I'm talking to retailers about policies for sales or anything like that. And I'm still there and I'm still engaged in conversation because I really care about the industry being, I don't know, being productive and staying as healthy as it is right now and growing. And it's really hard to walk away from that. I think you either care enough to be in there and like help other people's businesses grow as well, and help other designers get better and help, you know, I mean, game designers do all this all the time, play testing for other people and giving design feedback for free. I'm sure you're not getting paid doing consulting work for most, you know, game designers that are, you know, just starting to get published. So I think, you know, doing that is how you build a lot of these relationships, and you start having a presence there. And I do think that has a lot to do with building your brand, how you conduct yourself in all those spaces.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where there was something that happened at BGG and somebody was like, do people not realize that everyone in the industry talks to everyone else? And I think that's one thing that some people miss on a lot. And Matt, you were saying like when you just hang out and you live and you breathe games. So it's, sorry, the dogs just came home and totally ruined my train of thought. But when you are, basically I'm trying to figure out if there's the convention on season and there's convention off season and there's Facebook groups and there's BGG and stuff like that. But what other things can people do to engage and help build their brand that isn't maybe, I don't know. I'm wondering if there's a solution for somebody that isn't crazy extrovert and willing to just put themselves out there a lot. Is there places that they can go and help and be engaged with companies, but maybe more privately than publicly, and build their brand?
Game designers are doing it privately. I mean, I don't think that most of the game designers are doing it in front of consumers consciously. I think some of them do, but I think there's a lot of times when, until somebody, like, I don't remember, I didn't meet Eric until a couple of years ago. And at that point, I feel like everybody already knew who Eric was. And I was like, I don't know who Eric is. And I had been in the industry for a long time, but we just hadn't crossed paths. And I think that I mean, I've started making a more conscious effort to introduce myself to different people who do things that are very different than what I do in the industry. So game designers, because I think a lot of times different departments of different companies don't talk to each other. Like marketing doesn't talk to game design. And so it's especially in bigger companies. And so I really try to give like art direction feedback on games when they're at early stages, or theme feedback because I have some like knowledge on who's buying stuff at.
No!
Oh, it's such good stuff. Oh man, this is this technical stuff is so annoying. All right, you're back in. You're back
Terrible. I'm sorry.
You were in a great flow. So if you can remember where you were.
Yeah, I was just talking about, like, you know, I think you don't have to be super extroverted. You don't have to do this in front of everybody. You can go and play games at a prototyping convention and just give feedback there and get to know people on a real human level, and not just be blasting stuff I barely go on Board Game Geek for contributing. I mostly go on to read what other people have to say or consume articles by people. And I'm not a big personality on Twitter. Like, that's not natural to me. Like, I talk to people that I know. And I'm relatively extroverted. So if I was more introverted, I don't know how I would do anything in this business. It's really hard to put yourself out there, I think. So I think if you just connect with real people and bring what your knowledge set is to the table, and then you end up knowing people and being able to be a part of the community. I think it's important to be at conventions because you learn a lot at conventions. It's important to engage in all these places and to have your website and make it so if somebody's looking for you, they can find you. But I don't think that you have to be a huge extrovert. I think if you decide you want to be famous, then you better be an extrovert. Like if you want to be like nerd famous,
Nice.
if you want to be Will Wheaton, then you better be extroverted. But you know, that's not me.
I hear that. I have a question that I was going to ask Matt, but I'm going to obviously ask Amber while we still have you here, because we just seem to be like having like
I know
technical Russian roulette. But I was curious, what's your thoughts on designers if they strategically aim for working with certain publishers or certain brands? Should they be aiming to work with someone small and grow up with them? Should they be aiming to land with someone big? Like what are some career path suggestions or tips along the way that you think designers should chase after? I realize you're not a designer, but from someone looking and watching and giving some consulting, I think you can talk into this.
Sure, yeah. I think it's important to work with people who care about what you're making more than anything else. And I mean, I would go for a bigger company, but I think we've seen so many amazing little companies that just got started suddenly blossom into, players in the industry. I wouldn't exclude anything. I mean, unless you really just felt like they weren't presenting themselves properly or weren't being professional, like in whatever way you define professional. If you felt like they weren't going to have the pool to do a print run of 10,000 or 35,000 units, if the time came for that, I wouldn't work with them. But if you feel like they could scale up and they're good business people, because I think that's most game designers are sort of more creative, and so you really need to add that business angle to round out your abilities. So that's what I'd be going for. But if they're passionate about what you're making, then they're probably going to work harder on it. Absolutely.
No, I love that. So while we have Matt back, I'm gonna try to attempt a question with you. I mean, I know from my experience running around pitching from publisher to publisher, one of the people I'm always seeing and coming up to a meeting with is after you. So like, I feel like you're one of the hardest working, like hustling, working pitches and stuff like that. And I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about giving some advice on how you make that happen? I mean, some people don't know anyone, so I'm sure for you know some people, but what are some tips on like contacting ahead of time, or like what are some realistic ways to prepare for a pitch, all that kind of stuff, because I think you have a lot of kind of wisdom in that experience that you have. Can you talk into that, Matt? Maybe.
He
or
looks
not.
frozen.
He does look frozen.
It's a good looking.
He's either very intent.
Wow. The charge up, the anticipation is incredible. I thought there was some sound, so I stopped talking for a minute there. All right, well, we'll leave that question for Matt when he comes back, and we'll jump back to Amber and keep hammering her with questions while she
tries to find out what to plug into.
I feel like we're getting this really cool tour happening right now.
You are.
Where are you?
Bakersfield, California.
Can you guys hear now? Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you, Matt.
Cut my video out for a sec, because that's.
Let's try that.
Fucking.
That sounds so much better.
That sounds so good. Let's hear you, man. Did you hear my question at all?
I did hear your question about hustling.
Yeah.
There's just an innate need to hustle. Is really all there is to that, to some degree. Of it is very important to know the industry and know what it is, or and then like I'm actually I've done a lot more development stuff than design. It's only in the last little bit here that I've been really pushing myself as a more of a serious designer, or trying to get more published, I guess, rather. So somewhat of a grain of salt, but actually I've seen it from the other side a lot more. You have people that come up and they just have no idea the industry is like in general, what anyone's specific publisher's business is and what they kind of do. Like, hey, do you want to publish my game? And no. So part of that is the way that you present yourself, having a solid elevator pitch, having you explain what it is that makes your game, special and interesting. But beyond that, I think it's really, really who you're approaching and why your game is a good. As much as we all want to be artists and love games and all that, at the end of the day, it's a business, it's an industry. Publishers need to make money for the most part. They need to have games that work with the games they're selling to the market that they know how to sell to. And so when you go talk to somebody,
right? How many people would come to Loon and say, hey, do you guys want to publish this? And it's just like, well, no, because we only publish Andy's games. So if these basic things actually works, what people are looking for, you know, are you going to go to GMT and pitch them a party game? Like, no. All right. So you need to be able to articulate, here's what makes it cool. Here's why it works for you, because it either adds to your line, and you should do this.
Totally. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to some of our guests that are watching, but we are getting a lot of audio issues, especially with Matt. So we're gonna jump. Tiffany, you have a question for Amber?
Yeah, where is that hotel? No, the Gil was saying that your hotel was very nice. So talking about, I kind of want to, there's so many great stuff that you've brought up and that Matt has brought up in regards to different types of branding. And so I kind of want to, I don't know, I want to try and focus it a little bit just in like, so we've talked about having a website, and we've talked about engaging in volunteering at conventions, and we've talked about just having consistent content being out, even if it's just a repost of Instagram. What about, like, how important is it to engage in like a local community? Because we have a lot of people that talk about doing like playtest sessions or going to local game stores and going to local conventions, and that's often a question that they have. How important do you feel is it to find or build a community locally, especially if like they can't travel or something?
Yeah,
like
I
that?
think it's really interesting. Like, well, first I want to just talk about what Matt was saying.
Oh yeah.
He was just talking about awareness of who you're pitching to and understanding what their brands are and whether or not they're in conflict with yours. And I think that's something that is really important, having worked for a bunch of publishers and having to say, no, we're not accepting game design submissions, or our calendar's planned out for the next 3 years. I think that there's a really good, I think there's a strong need for a community of game designers because they can help each other with that sort of thing. As an individual trying to do pitches, so you're basically doing sales, you're doing creative, and you're maybe trying to do marketing because you're trying to build a brand, but then also having all the business knowledge of here's what companies take submissions and here's which companies don't take submissions, here's what kind of submissions they're looking for, here's where the market is growing, here's where there's a need for this type of game. For example, like when we meet with Target, they might say, we really need more family games, but the party game space is super crowded. We don't need any more party games. So I don't know how often that goes from the people who are hearing that at Target, like salespeople from publishers, back to designers. Does that ever happen? I don't think so. But it could be super useful. So if I were a designer trying to figure all this stuff out, I would be talking to people I would be building a relationship with a publisher who is going to give you that kind of information and who's professional enough to be able to come back from an annual meeting or quarterly meeting with a big box store and be like, hey, this is the kind of thing that there's really a need for. So if you have something that you've been working on for years and it's worth pulling off the shelf and trying to brush off and see if you can polish it up, like maybe that's a thing. I can also see that there could be a good use for having almost like a little mini trade organization where somebody keeps a Google Doc that's like, here's what publishers are showing up to. I don't remember what the speed dating things is what they're called. I think they do that at a lot of conventions. And, just figuring out who's actually taking submissions, what do they want? Just figuring out the fact that you need to show up with a sell sheet and you don't need to focus a lot on art, or saying, hey, I've got a subscription to the Noun Project, and that's a really good way to like put some icons on your stuff and stop searching the internet for art constantly when your game may never get made. I think that stuff like that is really good feedback. So I think it's important to have a community for those reasons. I don't necessarily think that it's important to have a community for branding reasons. Unless it's going to be really strong. I do think there's a bunch of Canadians up there that seem to be doing a good job of getting themselves known, and like also promoting each other and working together. So I think they've done a good job of, I don't know what, I think there's like a Canadian designer guild or something like that. I don't know what it is, but I know of it, which I think says that there's some brand there. And I really like that. It makes me feel like they've all helped each other and they're all really trying to improve. So I tend to take them more seriously, especially if like Daryl's like, hey, you should really look at Chris's project, or, you know, look at Sen's project that he's working on. I would do that. Even though I don't really take game submissions, I might like say, hey, well, this publisher seems like a good fit for that. So I don't know if that's branding. I think that's more functional, but I think there's some merit to it. I think with branding, it's more like, think about what's important to you. Do all of your games have zombies in them? Do all of your games have like co-op? Are all of your games co-op? Like, what is your brand as a designer? Like, what are the things that make you you? And really try and work on writing those out. It's like one of the most difficult things you can do for yourself. So getting other people who care about you involved is really helpful. We did that for Looney Labs, and we came up with like brand pillars. And it was really an interesting exercise. We brought somebody in to help for a day, and she basically wrote up, here's what your brand pillars are for the company, and here's what different channels you should present them on. So for example, we're not going to be talking about how much we love artwork and some of the artists we work with on Twitter, but we will do that on Instagram. So that's an appropriate channel for showing off that brand pillar. And I think it's worth anybody kind of learning a little bit about that, because it's going to help you understand where the marketing side of the publishing company is coming from when they are giving you feedback about your game, or wanting to make edits to your game, or deciding where to place it and, you know, when to place it. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Super helpful. Oh, I love this stuff. We're going to have a whole nother episode where we actually have technical difficulties taken care of, where we can hear half of the amazing things that Matt's saying, that we can dive deeper into some of these things that you're just touching on, Amber, because I think there is a lot that we need to cross-pollinate and learn from each other so that we can actually understand the game industry better, and then that's going to re-inform designers on how to make products and games that fit the industry, and so that people are going to achieve success because they're really tuned in to what everyone's looking for, and they're asking the right questions when they're evaluating their designs.
So Kristen Looney taught me this thing called, like, I had never heard anybody say this before, guerrilla marketing. And I think like Matt is a great example of guerrilla marketing. It's like kind of just like going out and like, I don't know what the exact definition of it is, but my sense of it is like, it's the kind of person who goes and like, you see that there's an Adventure Time presentation at San Diego Comic-Con, so you hand everybody in line an Adventure Time Flux promo card. And Kristen is really, really good at doing that. And I think that's how it's just sort of in her nature to do that sort of thing. So I learned a lot from her working with her. And I think it's the kind of thing that Matt's also really good at. He's good at just kind of like, he's not introverted. He just goes out and puts himself out there, and he's like, hey, you're really going to love this. I'm so confident you're going to love this. Just come play with me. And that kind of thing is really different than the way that I think about marketing and branding, but it's super valuable. And I think for people who don't have a huge budget or a big staff behind them. So
yeah, we just lost Amber, but that's all right. I'm going to pass the ball to Matt. Let's see. What do you have on guerrilla marketing?
For me, I came up in like stock, and I played in bands and did a label, and a lot of this has now become sort of marketing with stuff that we were all doing. Kids trying to get our name out there, trying to make moves, trying to do stuff. Bunch of, you know, being out there and hustling, figure out what it is, make the moves that you and figure out interesting ways to do it. You know, you got to get noticed, but it's got to, the big thing here is that it needs to be authentic, especially in the case of real guerrilla marketing kind of stuff, which I don't really love as a term, but you know, it can't be forced. People see through that bullshit. It needs to be authentic representation of who you are and what you're trying to do. outside the box of how you can do that in more interesting and engaging ways.
Yeah, exploring different and yeah, it was tough to hear on most of those, but I think if you can't hear it and you're not watching live, go back and turn the volume up because he had some really great stuff in that. All of Matt's stuff has been good. So Amber, we've had so many great points, and so for the last question for you, basically, like we've talked about so many different things that you can do, and can you just imagine that somebody is watching the show and they're having a moment because they haven't realized any of this so far. What is like the one basically next step? Like what would be the most important thing that you think that somebody that wants to start building their brand and getting their name out there and starting to do that, what is the one thing that they should do like today? Or start doing today, I should say.
Yeah. I guess I would say just figure out what really matters to you and make sure that you're presenting that everywhere in every way that you can. And in the way, whenever you're posting online or showing up at a convention or, buying exhibit space or buying an ad or presenting in a meeting, you're representing your brand. And so figure out what really matters to you and make sure you're communicating that consistently. I mean, I think you can do that visually and verbally, and also in your products. And so I really think that's important, just that consistency and knowing what your brand is, which is, I think, the hardest part.
Yeah. Matt, I don't know if we can, if your audio will hold out, but do you have like the same question, essentially, like one thing that they can do like today to start building that brand and stuff like that?
I think the biggest thing you can do right now today that is not super hard is two levels at which you can do it. One is you actually have a little bit of money in the bank. You need to book your trip to whatever relatively large convention is close to you, and you need to post in the Facebook industry group that you are looking to volunteer. And if anybody's looking for X show volunteers, you're happy to do it. And if you don't have the money to do that, then you need to figure out a fucking budget to save the money to do that.
So get to shows, like figure out and get to shows. Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We clearly have amazing supporters. Somehow there are people watching this live. Still with so many technical difficulties. You are saints. You are, I am so furious right now.
Our guests are also saints for sticking through this.
Our guests are incredible. We're going to get them on again another time.
Sorry, guys.
Because they are amazing. They have these great wealths of knowledge and experiences, and they're articulate, and I love them personally. And so we're going to have them on another time. I thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And thank you. Keep making great games, and we look forward to playing your game soon.
Yeah. Also, go find Amber and Matt on their various social media.
Find them on social media. Support them. Ask them questions. They're really nice. They'll answer you.
Yes.
Ciao.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Fake out music. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.